The city did not drown. It inhaled. When the water came, it didn't crash or roar. It arrived quietly, with the patience of inevitability. The air thickened, the streets filled, and what once was sky became reflection. People thought the city had died, but the truth is simpler, stranger. It learned how to breathe differently. Beneath the surface, movement slowed. Gravity loosened its grip. Windows exhaled their final bubbles into the silence. Cars, stairways, billboards, all of them now drift between stillness and dream. The city's pulse did not stop. It simply sank, beating beneath layers of pressure and time. Down here, light moves differently. It bends, ripples, hesitates, as if afraid to reveal too much. The sun no longer burns. It filters. It enters softly, painting ruins in gold and blue. The air is gone, yet beauty remains. Pure, unpolluted by sound, by motion, by ambition. There's a strange peace in this submerged world. The noise of survival has been replaced by rhythm, the slow sway of kelp where cables used to hang, the soft knock of debris against marble columns, the faint pulse of life growing in what we once called destruction. Perhaps the city was never meant to rise. Perhaps it was meant to fall, to return to the element that remembers everything. Because beneath the flood, where silence hums like breath, you realize the city didn't vanish. It evolved. It became something ancient again, something alive. Silence is never truly silent underwater. It moves, it breathes, it carries the faintest echoes of what once was. Beneath the surface, sound becomes weight, slow, resonant, eternal. Every ripple tells a story. Every vibration remembers the world above. The drowned city whispers in frequencies we can no longer hear. The creak of a collapsing sign, the hollow song of a pipe bending with the tide, the distant moan of current through the hollow bones of buildings. Each tone a syllable of a forgotten language, a dialect of decay and endurance. Wherever you listen, the ocean speaks, not in words, but in feeling. It murmurs secrets of those who fled too late, their voices now folded into the current. It hums the rhythm of the machines that once ruled this place, their circuits corroded, yet still dreaming in electric silence. Even the fish, moving through corridors once lit by fluorescent light, seemed to swim through memory. Up above, noise was a shield. Down here, sound is confession. There's no need for shouting, only for listening. The water transmits everything, the groan of pressure, the distant shifting of ruins, the heartbeat of the sea itself. And as you descend deeper, the whispers become clearer, not voices of ghosts, but of transformation. It's as if the city, once deafened by its own ambition, has finally learned how to speak honestly. Every whisper beneath the surface says the same thing, again and again. I'm still here. Light behaves like memory underwater, bending, refracting, never arriving the same way twice. It filters through the surface in trembling shards, touches the ruins gently, and vanishes. What used to be windows are now mirrors for the sea, broken, glimmering, alive. Glass no longer reflects the city. It reflects the ocean's pulse. Salt has taken over where architecture once ruled. It spreads like frost, crystallizing on walls, tracing outlines of vanished rooms. Every surface bears a faint white memory, the residue of evaporation, the ghost of air that used to fill these spaces. Salt preserves what time would erase. It keeps beauty trapped in corrosion, delicate and eternal. You can still see the outlines of offices, homes, corridors, a desk covered in coral, a chandelier swaying gently in the current. Light flickers across these remnants like film projected underwater, frames of another life, shimmering but unreachable. The city, once proud of its geometry, has dissolved into fluid grace. Its sharp corners have softened, its logic undone by the slow patience of the tide. Glass and salt, two fragile things that survive destruction by surrendering to it. They don't resist, they yield, they transform. Perhaps that's what beauty really is. Not perfection, but persistence. The art of breaking gracefully. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The faint crackle of glass meeting salt, the sound of ruin learning to shine. Down here, fragility isn't weakness. It's how the city remembers to glow. The deeper you go, the heavier the silence becomes. It's not emptiness, it's presence. A vast, invisible weight pressing against every wall, every fragment of stone, every breath that dares to remain. Down here, pressure is prayer. It folds everything inward, demanding stillness, demanding reverence. In this submerged cathedral, the architecture of faith has changed. Columns once built for worship now bend beneath the sea. Light replaces stained glass, rippling in gold and blue through fractured ceilings. Fish glide where choirs once stood. Each movement feels sacred, not because someone is watching, but because nothing is. The city above believed in progress. The city below believes in endurance. There's no preaching here, no noise of devotion. The silence itself is divine, so complete it hums. The walls vibrate faintly under the ocean's hand, the way lungs tremble during prayer. Even decay feels holy when it happens this slowly. Every structure is a relic. Every sound, the groan of metal, the whisper of sand, becomes liturgy. You realize that faith never belonged to gods or buildings. It belonged to the act of surrendering to something larger than yourself. Here, that something is water. Infinite, patient, mercilessly kind. The pressure deepens, and you feel it not on your skin, but in your mind. It compresses thought, forcing simplicity. And within that simplicity, a strange peace surfaces. The understanding that survival isn't about rising. Sometimes it's about learning to live beneath the weight. Time forgets nothing. It only changes color. Down here, rust blooms like a slow confession. It spreads across iron and steel with the patience of a painter, turning function into form, ruin into revelation. What once resisted decay now wears it proudly, glowing in shades of red and gold beneath the dim blue light. Rust is the handwriting of water. Every streak tells a story, of air that once existed, of metal that once believed itself eternal. It speaks of bridges and gates, of machines that turned, of doors that opened to lives now dissolved. Nothing resists the sea forever. But in surrender, everything becomes beautiful again. The surface world feared corrosion, the slow undoing of progress. But here, rust is resurrection. It transforms the rigid into the organic, the industrial into the intimate. Each beam, each pipe, each forgotten relic of civilization becomes part of the ocean's anatomy, pulsing with quiet life. Touch it, and you feel softness where there should be strength. A gentle reminder that endurance is not about staying intact, but about being changed and remaining recognizable. Rust does not erase, it redefines. It's time's way of remembering what mattered without needing to preserve it. Maybe memory works the same way. It stains us, reshapes us, but never leaves. The sharp edges of the past grow dull, but the color deepens, warmer, truer. What the world calls decay, the ocean calls continuity. And as you drift through the ruins, surrounded by these rust-red echoes of yesterday, you understand. Nothing dies here. It only learns a slower way of living. Buildings are supposed to reach upward, a collective gesture of defiance against gravity. But down here, that instinct has been undone. The towers no longer point to heaven. They bow. Their windows stare not at clouds, but at currents. Their steel ribs stretch into darkness, humbled by the endless blue above. The city once worshipped the sky, every skyline an anthem of ambition. every skyscraper a monument to control. But water changed the direction of faith. Now the architecture prays downward. It listens instead of reaching. The glass no longer reflects sunlight. It filters shadows. In the submerged quiet, these structures seem wiser, almost at peace. Without the weight of progress pressing on them, they breathe differently. The walls that once echoed with traffic now hold a kind of meditative stillness. The elevators hang suspended in the deep like memories that forgot their purpose. It's strange how surrender transforms design. When the city lost its horizon, it found its depth. And in that inversion, sky traded for sea, height replaced by stillness, beauty shifted too. Perfection was never in symmetry. It was in survival. In the way concrete softens, how light lingers longer in ruins than it ever did on glass. The architecture that forgot the sky didn't fail. It evolved. It learned that meaning doesn't always come from ascent, but from immersion. The world above builds to conquer. The world below learns to belong. And maybe that's the truest form of architecture. Not what reaches furthest into the sky, but what still stands when the sky is gone. The ocean doesn't erase, it reflects. When you look down through the trembling surface, you don't see destruction. You see memory refracted. The city below shimmers like a thought you almost forgot. Distorted, familiar, impossibly distant. The sea has turned ruin into reflection, history into myth. Atlantis was never lost. It simply became metaphor, a mirror for every civilization that mistook height for permanence. The submerged city below isn't a legend, it's recognition. It's the version of us we buried under ambition, now staring back through layers of blue. Light touches the water's surface and fractures, creating multiple truths. Every ripple tells a different story. To one eye, the city is gone. To another, it's reborn. And maybe both are true. Because the ocean, like memory, never commits to a single version of reality. It keeps everything. The beauty, the wreckage, the contradiction. As you stare into that shifting reflection, something unsettling happens. You start to see yourself there. Your outlines blur, merging with the skyline below. The drowned city becomes personal. Not a relic, but a reminder that everything we build, from towers to identities, eventually returns to the same element. The soft, fluid cradle of forgetting. The Atlantean mirror doesn't show loss. It shows honesty. It reflects what happens when we stop pretending to rise forever, when we surrender to the idea that even collapse has its own kind of grace. Because beneath the shimmer, beneath the distortion, beauty still breathes, waiting for us to recognize that the end was never an ending. It was always a reflection. The sea rebuilds what we abandoned. Where walls once held offices and cables, coral now blooms in slow, luminous silence. The ocean is patient. It doesn't destroy. It reclaims. Each beam, each arch becomes a skeleton for new life. Color returns not as paint, but as pulse. Concrete, once a symbol of permanence, softens here. It no longer resists nature. It hosts it. You can see entire ecosystems born inside cracks once filled with dust. Fish swim through broken windows, algae weave over staircases, and coral grows in spirals that mimic the geometry of human ambition. The city breathes again, but this time through gills. There's something tender in this reversal. Nature doesn't judge what we left behind. It heals without hatred, rearranging ruin into harmony. The hard edges of architecture are now softened by living color, each coral branch an act of quiet forgiveness. The artificial and the organic blur until you can't tell where creation ends and reclamation begins. If you drift closer, you'll see that the coral follows the patterns of our design, as if mimicking the hands that once built these walls. It's not imitation, it's continuation. Life adapting, not in opposition, but in dialogue. We feared the sea because it swallowed our cities, but maybe it was saving them, turning monuments of ego into sanctuaries of balance. Under the surface, where concrete meets coral, beauty learns to coexist with ruin. And that, perhaps, is the true resurrection, not rebuilding what was lost, but allowing the ocean to finish what we began. Somewhere beneath the water, deep within the submerged skeleton of a skyscraper, there is still movement. Not much, just the faintest vibration, the ghost of a mechanism that refuses to rest. The old elevators, sealed and silent for decades, hum softly when the currents pass. The sound isn't mechanical anymore, it's musical, like memory replaying itself for no one. These shafts were once arteries of ambition. They carried people upward, to meetings, to glass offices, to fleeting triumphs that now sleep beneath the tide. Each floor was a destination, each bell a promise. But now, the doors no longer open. The lights no longer glow. The cables hang like the veins of a body that has forgotten its heartbeat. And yet, something lingers. The pressure of the ocean mimics the rhythm of machinery. The water pushes through cracks and vents, making the same sighing sounds the elevators once made when they ascended. It's as if the city dreams of movement, even in stillness, as if it can't accept its own immobility. Listen long enough, and you'll hear the past breathing. The soft chime of metal expanding, the whisper of water brushing the buttons that no longer light. In this submerged tower, technology becomes prayer, not for power, but for memory. The sound of forgotten elevators is not noise, it's longing. The ghost of a vertical life, replayed in slow motion beneath the sea. A reminder that even when progress sinks, the echo of ascent never really disappears. Books were never meant to sink. They were born to breathe, to carry air inside every page, to hold meaning above the surface. But here, they float in fragments, words unspooling like ribbons of ink, sentences dissolving into the water, ideas scattering into silence. The city's libraries are now cathedrals of absence, where language sleeps inside sediment. Paper decays, but meaning lingers. You can see it in the faint outlines of titles on spines turned soft with salt, in the blurred text of stories once whispered by firelight. Even as the letters vanish, the rhythm remains, like a song remembered without lyrics. The ocean doesn't destroy literature, it translates it. Every current becomes a paragraph, every ripple a stanza. Perhaps words, once freed from paper, finally return to what they always were. Fluid. They move between languages, between worlds, between lives. Some of the stories drift upward, reaching the light. Others sink deeper, buried beneath coral and memory. Together, they form a new archive, not written, but felt. We used to believe that preservation meant keeping things dry, untouched, unchanging. But the ocean knows better. It teaches that endurance is not in resisting dissolution, but in transforming through it. A sentence that melts into water is not lost. It becomes part of everything. So the next time the waves rise against the shore, imagine them whispering. They're not threatening, they're reading, reciting the library of drowned words, every confession, every dream, every name that refused to stay silent, now written across the endless surface of the sea. Down here, light doesn't travel, it drifts. It moves in fragments, fractured by water and glass, breaking into colors that were never meant to exist. The old city windows catch it like relics, scattering it across the ruins in trembling beams. Each shard of reflection becomes an exhibit, a moment of illumination trapped between decay and memory. The Museum of Broken Light has no walls, no guards, no visitors. It's curated by chance, by the way the sun filters through cracks, by how fish stir dust into constellations, by how shadows bend around forgotten architecture. The light doesn't reveal, it interprets. It paints the drowned city as if time itself were the artist, using water as its lens. If you swim slowly enough, you'll see faces in the reflections. Not ghosts, but gestures. A hand reaching, a curtain moving, a door half opened. It's the memory of human motion caught in beams that can't decide where to go. Every flicker feels alive, yet it belongs to nothing. Light remembers the shapes of things even after they're gone. What's remarkable is how gentle it all feels. There's no tragedy in this brightness, only forgiveness. The sun doesn't mourn what it can't touch. It just keeps trying. Even at the ocean's edge, it reaches through the surface, splintering itself into beauty one last time before fading. Perhaps that's what all light does. It breaks so that something else can be seen. It fractures to remind us that illumination isn't about clarity, but about persistence. In the Museum of Broken Light, ruin becomes radiance, and every shimmer tells the same quiet truth. Even when beauty dies, it still finds a way to glow. The deeper you descend, the more the ocean begins to resemble the cosmos. The water darkens into infinite blue, then into black, not absence, but depth. Light travels here like starlight, faint and patient, crossing a universe of silence to touch what remains. The city's outlines blur into constellations of debris, its windows flickering with the slow pulse of distant fish. The sea has turned downward into upward, the abyss into sky. Down here, gravity loses meaning. Objects float where they once stood firm. Statues drift sideways, curtains sway where air no longer breathes, coins spin endlessly before settling into dust. The horizon dissolves. Above and below become the same direction. You realize how fragile orientation really was, a human invention to make sense of infinity. Every sound feels distant, every shimmer ancient. You could mistake this place for outer space. Except space is cold, and this darkness feels alive. It hums, it moves, it surrounds without suffocating. If you stay long enough, the difference between stars and bubbles vanishes. Both are brief illuminations, moments of brightness lost to vastness. The subterranean skies remind us that falling and flying are closer than we think. That descent, when slow enough, feels like ascension. That perhaps heaven was never above us. It was simply hidden beneath reflection, waiting for silence to show the way. Here, the city dreams in constellations. Its rooftops are galaxies. Its windows are stars. And somewhere in the distance between pressure and peace, you understand that the end of the world can look astonishingly like the beginning of one. Water has a way of carrying memory. It doesn't flow in straight lines. It drifts, swirls, folds upon itself, just like thought. The currents that move through the drowned city are not random. They trace invisible routes through the ruins, mapping absence the way wind maps distance. Every eddy feels like recollection, every swirl a gesture of something returning. When you move through this liquid maze, you feel the presence of what once filled it. Footsteps on sidewalks, laughter spilling from cafes, the distant hum of traffic layered like heartbeat. The sea has kept them all woven into its movement. The currents are the city's ghosts. They pass through doorways, spiral through stairwells, brushing against the remnants of a world that still breathes through them. Sometimes, it feels as if the water itself is remembering how to be human. It pauses near corners, lingers around statues, loops endlessly around the base of a submerged clock tower, repeating old habits like a dream that can't wake. The city doesn't resist. It sways, patient, allowing its memories to travel freely. If you listen, really listen, you'll hear it. Not words, but motion. A rhythm of what was, moving through what is. A whisper that says, "We were here. We moved. We mattered." Ghosts don't haunt because they're lost. They haunt because they remember the shape of belonging. And maybe the sea, in its endless motion, has become the most faithful ghost of all. keeping the city alive not through presence, but through movement that never forgets to return. Silence is heavier underwater. It presses against your chest, against your thoughts, until even memory starts to echo. Every sound feels magnified, a single drop, a faint creak, a distant vibration through metal. And then, nothing. The quiet here isn't absence, it's density. You don't hear it, you feel it. The surface world fears silence because it reveals. But down here, revelation is all that's left. The city has surrendered its voice. No footsteps, no engines, no conversation. Only stillness, thick and complete. And yet within that stillness, everything speaks. The walls hum faintly with pressure. The current murmurs against glass. The ruins vibrate with the low, infinite tone of time, continuing without us. Silence is not void. It's witness. It remembers every noise that once existed, not as sound, but as impression. You sense it in the walls that hold their breath, in the cables that tremble like nerves remembering music. The deeper you go, the more it feels like entering the mind of the world itself, quiet, vast, unspoken. Humans were never built for silence this profound. It dismantles identity. It strips language of meaning. You begin to understand how fragile communication truly is, how easily it dissolves when there's nothing left to answer back. And yet, there's a peace in this pressure, a strange clarity. When everything stops making noise, what remains is truth. Not dramatic, not divine, just simple, honest existence. The silence doesn't demand understanding. It only asks to be heard. And if you stay long enough, if you surrender to it fully, you realize it's not the city that's silent. It's you. Finally quiet enough to listen. Life never truly vanished. It just changed rhythm. In the drowned city, green returns first, quietly, insistently. Algae bloom across walls and monuments like veins rediscovering their purpose. They shimmer under fractured sunlight, breathing oxygen into the stillness. What once was concrete becomes skin again, porous, alive, luminous. Algae don't rush. They move at the pace of patience, each cell multiplying, spreading, covering the ruins in slow grace. Where humans built to dominate, algae grow to heal. They ask for nothing, yet give the city back its color, not the cold gray of progress, but the deep, living green of renewal. If you drift through the submerged streets, you'll see their pulse everywhere, soft waves undulating over marble, threads of emerald light wrapping statues, entire stairways glowing like veins beneath transparent flesh. It feels less like ruin, more like metamorphosis, the city remembering how to breathe through the language of nature. Science calls it photosynthesis, but standing there, watching sunlight filter through green filaments, it feels closer to prayer. The algae don't need history or memory or grief. They exist without nostalgia. They purify without asking what came before. Perhaps that's why the ocean chose them to inherit our world, not because they're strong, but because they're humble. They don't rebuild, they restore. They turn decay into light, reminding us that even in surrender, life can pulse beautifully. And as you float past those glowing surfaces, you realize something profound. What we call ruin, nature calls beginning. Time moves differently down here. The clock tower still stands, tilted, encrusted, solemn, its hands forever frozen at the hour the city disappeared. Yet the water around it flows endlessly, ignoring what it marks. The clocks have stopped, but time hasn't. It just changed its texture. Once the tower ruled the rhythm of life. Its bells dictated beginnings and endings, the start of work, the closing of markets, the pulse of the living world. But underwater, it's no longer a master. It's a relic. The sound that once defined order has been replaced by the hush of current slipping through stone. The city that worshipped precision now breathes in timelessness. The face of the clock is covered in coral. Tiny fish dart through the Roman numerals, indifferent to their meaning. Algae drape the tower like a veil, softening its authority. The concept of late doesn't exist here. Neither does soon. In the deep, every second stretches until it dissolves into eternity. Time, it turns out, was always fragile, a human invention pretending to be divine. Now it sits quietly, humbled by water and weight. The tower that once measured life now witnesses it unfold without measure, without urgency. Its stillness feels less like death and more like forgiveness. If you float close enough, you might hear a sound, not a chime, but a resonance, deep and slow, like the echo of the past exhaling. It's the memory of time itself, still vibrating faintly in the bones of the clock. Here, in the submerged tower, you understand what the surface forgot, that the end of time is not silence, it's peace. Sunlight shouldn't be able to reach this far, and yet it does. It travels through layers of water and dust, bending, breaking, slowing, until it finally touches the ruins like a hand reaching from heaven to memory. The effect is spectral. Beams of gold slicing through darkness, illuminating columns, statues, and doorways as if the city still believes in mornings. The deeper chambers glow with their own rhythm. Particles drift through the beams like dust in a cathedral. Every flicker a fragment of time suspended mid-air or mid-water. The city becomes a gallery of illumination, a place where light no longer obeys the laws of physics, but the laws of remembrance. It moves slower, more thoughtfully, as if it knows it's trespassing. Every wall reflects a piece of the sun. Each ripple of light climbs the architecture like language rediscovering itself. The beams wander through the corridors, touching symbols no one can read anymore, tracing the outlines of mosaics now alive with algae and coral. It's as though light has decided to stay, not to reveal but to belong. Here, the sacred isn't found in what's bright, but in what endures. The catacombs hum softly, as if the water itself prays. You can't tell where light ends and ruin begins, where creation stops and surrender continues. It all feels connected, like the sea and the city are collaborating in a single act of forgiveness. Maybe that's what light was always meant to do. Not conquer the dark, but coexist with it. To move slowly enough that even silence can see itself. The deeper you drift, the harder it is to tell where the sea ends and the city begins. Columns rise like vertebrae. Arches curve like ribs. Streets form veins that once carried motion, now carrying current. The city has become an anatomy, not of architecture, but of remembrance. The water moves through it as if through a body. It fills the hollow lungs of train tunnels, circulates through office corridors, whispers through windows like breath through teeth. The stones respond, slow, dignified, alive. Together, they form a single organism. The sea as blood, the city as bone. It's unsettling, this merging of human creation and natural form. Walls pulse faintly with the rhythm of tide. The line between structure and creature dissolves. Statues seem to inhale. Facades ripple like skin. Everything built to last has surrendered to transformation, and in doing so, achieved a strange kind of immortality. Perhaps this is what evolution truly looks like. Not progress, but return. The city, stripped of ego, finds its way back into the body of the world. Its precision erodes into softness, its pride into rhythm. Concrete learns to breathe again. When you touch a wall down here, it feels warm, not with heat, but with memory. It's the warmth of something that once contained life, and still does. And for a fleeting moment, as you drift among these bones of civilization, you realize that the ocean didn't claim the city. It adopted it. The human body was never meant to live underwater. Yet the imagination keeps returning here, dreaming in currents, breathing in metaphors. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's longing. But in the deep, surrounded by silence and blue, something ancient inside us wakes. It's as if the soul remembers what the lungs forgot, that before we spoke, before we walked, we floated. The survivors of the flood, those who escaped upward, still dream downward. They see themselves swimming through their old neighborhoods, passing over rooftops and streetlights like explorers in slow motion. The air in those dreams feels heavy, yet clean. Every movement feels deliberate, every thought liquid. There's no rush to surface, no need to run. Only the soft rhythm of existence unmeasured by clocks. These oxygen dreams are not nightmares, they're reconciliations. Visions where the human and the ocean stop being enemies. The water doesn't drown, it embraces. It fills the lungs not to suffocate, but to remind them that breath is not the only way to live. In the dream, you exhale and don't lose life. You become part of it. Maybe these dreams are the sea's way of calling us home, not to reclaim, but to remind. That the barrier between air and water, between waking and remembering, was never as strong as we believed. That survival might not mean resistance, but adaptation, the art of breathing differently. When you wake, you'll still taste salt on your tongue, feel pressure behind your ribs, and for a moment you'll miss it. The weight, the quiet, the endless, forgiving blue. Because deep down, every human heart remembers the ocean it once belonged to. There's a moment in the deep when the silence breaks, not with noise, but with movement. A shadow passes overhead, vast and graceful. A whale glides through what was once a boulevard, its fin brushing the edge of a skyscraper. It moves slowly, reverently, as if visiting a sacred ruin. The city doesn't resist. It opens itself, letting the ocean's giants move through its forgotten corridors like living prayers. Through the glassless windows, the whales drift, enormous, effortless, utterly indifferent to the architecture around them. They are the new citizens now, inheriting the spaces once filled with noise and intention. Their songs echo through stairwells, deep and mournful, vibrating against the bones of buildings. The sound feels both foreign and familiar, like hearing the earth remember itself. There's a strange harmony in the sight, a grace that dissolves the absurdity of it all. The animals that once symbolized freedom now glide through monuments of confinement. Concrete becomes coral. Windows become gateways. The city breathes again through the movement of what was never meant to belong here, and yet somehow does. The whales don't know our history. They don't see tragedy. They see only space, rooms of light and current. Where we saw ruin, they find passage. Where we built boundaries, they find fluidity. And as their shadows fade into the blue, you realize something profound. The ocean isn't reclaiming what was ours. It's reminding us what was never truly meant to be owned. The whales pass through windows like memories through dreams, beautiful, brief, and completely free. When the last trace of sunlight fades, another kind of illumination takes its place. Tiny organisms begin to shimmer in the dark. Plankton, jellyfish, threads of unseen life pulsing with quiet electricity. The drowned city glows from within, not with fire or filament, but with the living light of the deep. Bioluminescence doesn't demand attention. It simply exists, small, soft, steady. Every movement stirs a response. A hand brushed through the water releases constellations. Footsteps on the ocean floor awaken galaxies. The ruins, once gray and forgotten, now breathe in color. The windows gleam faintly like eyes reopening after centuries of sleep. This is not the light of survival. It's the light of acceptance. A glow born from surrender. from creatures that learned to thrive without the sun. They turn darkness itself into energy, transforming absence into radiance. The city, too, begins to mimic them. Its metal veins hum with phosphorescent life, its corners bloom with faint blue halos. Standing there, surrounded by this living light, you understand something profound. Illumination was never meant to conquer darkness, only to coexist with it. The glow doesn't chase shadow, it reveals that shadow has beauty too. Every flicker, every spark beneath the waves is proof that life refuses to vanish, that even when forgotten, it still finds ways to speak. The silence glows because life has learned to whisper instead of shout. And in that whisper lies a new form of faith, quiet, patient, eternal. What the surface calls darkness, the ocean calls light. There are no graves underwater, only drift. Down here, the dead don't rest, they move. The ocean does not bury, it carries. Every object, every remnant, every body released to the deep finds a strange freedom in surrendering its weight. Death here is not stillness, it's motion without gravity. The drowned city became a cemetery without sorrow. Doors swing open softly with the current. Chairs float beside tables. A photograph drifts past a cracked window, its image blurred but not erased. Even loss has rhythm here. Nothing stays where it fell. Everything learns to move again. The ocean holds the fallen gently. Instead of headstones, there are corals. Instead of names, there are currents. The sea doesn't mark where life ends. It blurs the boundary completely. In its infinite patience, it teaches the one truth the surface never accepted, that death is not the opposite of life, but part of its design. If you swim through this silent graveyard, you feel it, the calm, the dignity. There's no horror in it, no despair, just transition. The objects of our world, books, toys, statues, tools, drift beside each other like old souls finally at peace. The pressure here does not crush, it cradles. This is what eternity looks like when gravity is gone. A slow dance between what once was and what continues to be. No heaven above, no hell below, only this vast shimmering in between, where even the end has learned how to float. And maybe that's what the ocean wanted all along. Not to drown us, but to teach us how to let go beautifully. Even the air remembers. Tiny pockets of oxygen cling to ceilings, walls, and rusted beams. Small, trembling orbs of breath trapped when the flood came. When they rise, they release their voices, faint pops that sound almost like words, like sighs escaping from another time. If you listen closely, the city is still speaking. Every bubble that breaks the surface carries a fragment of its story. A note from before the silence, a memory rising to be heard. Some say the sound is mechanical, just pressure. But others know better. It's language in its purest form. Instinctive, fragile, fleeting. The messages are everywhere. Inside elevator shafts, trapped between staircases, hovering above door frames. The air from old rooms still drifts upward, patient and persistent. You can almost imagine the final breaths of the city collecting themselves, choosing when to be released. It's strange how communication outlives the communicator. Even after the words dissolve, the will to speak remains. The bubbles rise in uneven rhythms, like poetry, like heartbeat, like prayer. Each one bursts in a whisper that no one can translate. Yet somehow everyone understands. We were here. Maybe all stories are like this. Pockets of air inside the weight of water, rising slowly through time, hoping someone will still be listening when they break the surface. And when they do, the sea ripples briefly, as if nodding in recognition, then swallows the sound whole, keeping the secret alive in silence once more. Beneath all movement, beneath all ruin, there is rhythm. It's not the rhythm of sound, but of pulse. Slow, patient, eternal. The deep has a heart, though it doesn't beat as ours do. It expands and contracts with the tides, with the pressure, with the weight of everything that has ever fallen into it. Each rise of the current, each retreat, feels like breath. The ocean inhales the world, then releases it again, changed, but still whole. Down here, you feel that pulse more than you hear it. It moves through the bones of the city, through columns, through railings, through the cracked shells of forgotten cars. Every structure vibrates softly, as if in communion with something vast and unseen. Even the smallest ripple carries the heartbeat of the planet, repeating a rhythm older than language. Exist, dissolve, begin again. Time obeys this pulse. So does decay. Nothing truly stops. It only slows. The heart of the deep teaches that endurance isn't about speed or resistance. It's about rhythm, about knowing when to yield and when to hold. The city has learned this lesson perfectly. Its ruins no longer struggle against the sea. They sway with it, synchronized, serene. When you stand still, suspended in that vastness, it feels like listening to eternity breathe. You realize how frantic human life sounds compared to this. How loud, how rushed, how terrified of stillness. The ocean, by contrast, moves without fear. Its patience is its power. And somewhere within that endless heartbeat, you begin to understand that existence, real existence, is not a shout, but a pulse that never stops whispering, I am. Every city once had a bridge that meant something, a crossing between two worlds, two hearts, two versions of time. Now it lies beneath the surface, its arches draped in moss, its railings softened by coral. The bridge no longer connects land to land. It connects memory to silence. The ocean has turned it from passage to symbol, a monument to everything that tried to hold together what was always meant to drift apart. You can still see its outline through the haze, curved, elegant, skeletal. Schools of fish swim where footsteps once echoed. The current hums against the metal beams like wind through strings. The bridge has become an instrument now, playing songs for no one, its melodies composed by water and distance. Once, people crossed it to meet, to leave, to change. Every journey began or ended here. Now only the sea remembers those movements, the brief encounters, the goodbyes that lingered too long. The bridge endures, not as structure, but as idea. It reminds us that connection never truly collapses. It only changes medium. If you float beneath its shadow, you feel it, the echo of all those crossings, lovers walking hand in hand, workers returning home at dusk. The rhythm of ordinary life turned mythic by the ocean's patience. And as the light filters through the cracks above, the water shimmers in golden arches, as if time itself still recognizes this place as sacred. The bridge may have forgotten its destination, but it has not forgotten its purpose. Even now, long after the world stopped walking, it continues to hold, quietly, gracefully, the possibility of meeting. In the deep, loneliness feels different. It's no longer emptiness, it's atmosphere. The water presses against you like thought, surrounding you so completely that separation becomes impossible. There are no walls here, no echoes of conversation, no eyes to meet. Only the slow rhythm of your own breath, the one sound that reminds you you're still alive. On the surface, solitude isolates. Down here, it liberates. The city's ruins are silent companions, not reminders of loss, but reflections of endurance. Every archway, every window frame, every drifting object seems to watch without judgment. You don't feel small, you feel absorbed, dissolved into something vast enough to hold you without asking who you are. Solitude becomes oxygen. The deeper you sink, the easier it is to breathe. The need to explain, to perform, to be understood, all of it fades, replaced by an almost sacred quiet. The water accepts you without expectation. You are neither admired nor forgotten. You simply are. The paradox is beautiful. The more alone you are here, the more connected you feel. To pressure, to silence, to the rhythm of things that have no name. You realize that solitude was never about absence. It was about space. The kind that lets meaning grow again, slowly, like light through water. When you finally rise toward the surface, you'll carry some of that calm with you. A new kind of breath, drawn not from air, but from understanding. Because to be truly alone is not to be without others. It's to be finally, peacefully, with yourself. At first, everything down here seemed gray, stone, rust, silence. But slowly, as the sea claimed the city, color returned, not in paint or neon, but in life. Coral flared in crimson and gold along collapsed staircases. Schools of fish flickered like living mosaics through doorways once made for glass. Even the dust of ruin glows faintly now, refracting light as if remembering how to dream. Color under pressure behaves differently. It doesn't shout, it glows. Every hue feels earned, every tone hard-won from darkness. The sea paints with time, not pigment, and its palette is patience. Blue deepens until it becomes almost black, then blooms again into silver. Greens pulse like veins beneath the skin of stone. The world that drowned now shimmers with the quiet defiance of rebirth. This beauty isn't loud or nostalgic. It carries no need to impress. It's the beauty of continuation. Life finding its own rhythm in the space we left behind. The city, once defined by walls, now speaks in gradients. Its decay is its canvas, its surrender, its transformation. Maybe this is how the universe heals itself. Not by restoring what was lost, but by coloring over the absence until the wound becomes art. Here, destruction and creation breathe through each other. Every hue you see is both an ending and a beginning. When you look long enough, you realize the city never truly drowned. It simply changed its light, from artificial to organic, from mechanical to alive. And as the ocean glows with its slow, impossible palette, you understand. Beauty doesn't return after ruin. It's what ruin becomes when it learns how to breathe again. The ocean is patient. It remembers form long after form forgets itself. It moves through the city like an artist tracing memory, shaping water around the contours of what once was human. Where walls collapsed, it rebuilds in motion. Where towers fell, it sketches their ghosts in current and shadow. Every corner of the submerged world bears an echo of our geometry, softened, reimagined, but still undeniably ours. You can see it in the smallest gestures, the way waves curve where staircases used to spiral, how light drifts through doorways exactly as it did when they led somewhere. Even in ruin, the city remains legible, a language rewritten in liquid syntax. The sea has learned our architecture, but not our arrogance. It mimics without claiming, inhabits without owning. It doesn't rebuild to restore, but to remember. The walls it shapes are temporary, the arches fleeting, the beauty ever-changing, the way it always should have been. In time, the ocean will know our outlines better than we did. It will carry the memory of our hands, not the things we built, but the gestures of creation themselves. The sweep of an arm drawing plans, the rhythm of footsteps, the pause of breath before decision. It keeps all of it, folding our essence into its tides. And maybe that's what immortality truly is. Not to be remembered as monuments, but to be absorbed into something larger. To have the sea know our shape so well that even when the last stone dissolves, it still moves as we once dreamed. Fluid, fragile, reaching upward through blue. Eventually, all things rise, even memory. The city lies deep below, yet its reflection still trembles on the surface. Each wave above carries an outline of what was lost. The faint geometry of rooftops, the suggestion of streets, the shimmer of light where windows once caught dawn. The ocean keeps the memory close to the skin of the world, letting it breathe without ever returning it. The surface is deceptive. It looks new every second, yet holds centuries of reflection. Each ripple is a fragment of history, repeating, dissolving, reforming. The wind brushes over it, rearranging remembrance into motion. Above, clouds drift like passing thoughts. Below, the city dreams. Between them lies that thin, shifting border. Not water, not sky, but the place where forgetting meets reflection. When you look at the surface from beneath, it feels like looking into time. You see everything that's gone and everything that might come, layered and reversed. The city reaches upward, not to escape, but to remain visible, to remind the living that disappearance and remembrance are twins. Maybe memory was never meant to stay still. Maybe it was always meant to move like this, to shimmer, distort, and vanish before being born again. The sea knows how to keep what we can't bear to hold. It turns memory into motion, grief into light. And when the sunlight hits just right, the surface glows with impossible detail, the illusion of buildings breathing once more. But look too long, and it fades, slipping back into water. That's the mercy of memory. It never lets us see the past clearly enough to drown in it. There's a moment, just before darkness, when everything glows with impossible clarity. The last beam of sunlight pierces the surface, slicing through layers of blue and green until it touches the ruins one final time. It lingers on a column, a window, a fragment of glass. It doesn't illuminate, it remembers. The light knows it won't return here, so it looks carefully, reverently, as if saying goodbye. The city beneath doesn't move. It simply accepts the touch, quiet, unresisting. The fish slow, the current softens. Even the smallest particles of dust hang suspended, waiting for the inevitable. And then, as the last golden shimmer fades, everything changes tone. Color gives way to texture, sound gives way to heartbeat, clarity gives way to peace. This is not darkness as we know it. It's not the end. It's continuation. The ocean, having reclaimed light, begins to glow from within. Bioluminescent life awakens where sunlight used to fall, carrying the memory of radiance into eternity. The light does not vanish. It transforms. It becomes quieter, deeper, an inheritance passed from star to sea. Maybe that's how all endings work. They arrive not to extinguish, but to evolve what cannot remain the same. The last light underwater isn't a farewell. It's a reminder that even in surrender, beauty persists. That illumination, when it forgets its source, still finds a way to shine. And as the world above drifts into night, the world below continues to breathe, softly, endlessly, its ruins alive with a quiet, enduring glow. Because beauty doesn't survive in spite of destruction. It survives because of it.